These singers imagining a world where we live as one. We've been imagining that for a while, and it's a good vision to hold, yes? We see little glimmers of hope, you know? And I think it's easy to, there's two ways to look at it, everything, the old glass half full, half empty thing. And if we focus on those evidences of where there is more light, we're more likely to encourage it. There's a lot of work to be done, right? A lot of work to be done. But it's in celebrating the light wherever we can see it and the shift that's taking place that gives credence to the idea that we are evolving, that there is an upward spiral of recognizing a deeper truth. This is why spiritual practice, oftentimes people get frustrated because we have expectations in our mind about where we're supposed to be in the continuum of enlightenment at any particular time. I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but you're like, God, I've been at this for so many years, and shouldn't I be more awake by now? And that, of course, is a human censoring or a human reflection, a conscious self-consciousness that can be an interruption to what's already taking place. And oftentimes it's gyre-like. I think that's the word, or like how a falcon goes. It goes in a circle, but it's a ever upward spiral, where it seems like you're back to where you started from, but you're just a little bit more, a little bit higher, a little bit more altitude. And to recognize that is to know that there is an impulse, that we're not doing this ourselves. Thank God. Oh, God. If we were doing this ourselves, we'd be in trouble. Yes? That there's a higher power is what I'm saying, is that there is an impulse for growth. There's an impulse for, if you want to call it, spiritual evolution, which is really the waking up to what we really are. And that's going on all the time. That regardless of whatever the appearances may be and where we may mark progress or maybe see regression, that there is this impulse that's nonetheless always pushing us to be more of itself. We are being pushed by life, love, wholeness, whatever you call the divine, to be more of itself, to be more of an expression of the one presence, the one power, the one life, and the one love. It's always there. It's never on vacation. It never takes a break. It never goes, God, I'm exhausted. I've been working with you people for I don't know how many thousands of years. You're not getting it. I'm going to take a break. I'm off the job. Hire somebody else. I've been your consultant for eons, and my God, you were frustrating. It's like, no, that's not how, that's a human thing. But this infinitely inexhaustible spirit is always there. And it's up to us to sort of notice these moments in which the light pokes out. Where truth emerges and casts a glow of awakening or possibility or compassion or love or inclusiveness, as we're talking about today, upon what yesterday was just a little bit darker or a little bit less awake. Because that's how we tease it out. That's how we coax it forward, by recognizing it and seeing that this is happening all the time. So to recognize that this activity is going on all the time is to say that we are co-creators of the evolution that's taking place on this planet. That it's not just us, rolling up our sleeves, which I did today to show you. It's a visual aid that I've rolled up my sleeves. It's actually to recognize that beyond all of the efforting that you and I are doing, there is always an impulse for greater and greater light. That is the nature of the truth. That is the nature of the divine, is to express more of itself. And the way we realize that, there's the part that we have to do with it. How available are we for this impulse? Because it's not that we have to get this divine closer to us or to get behind us or to work with us, because that's already part of what we are. We are already its expression in the world. We are the divine expression in the world. We don't have to get any more God in us. The idea is for us to be more available to be the expression. Does this make sense to you? I did this morning in the mirror as I was telling myself this story, that I need to be more available to it. Not that it needs to be more present to me. Does this make sense? Because this is the confusion a lot of us have about any kind of growth in spiritual terms, is we feel that, okay, in this relationship that I've got, God has left, has abandoned me, right? Because we feel a loss of love or a lack of respect or something has happened. And we begin to start making up stories about how some higher power has sort of retreated in our life. And the truth is that the higher power can never retreat, because you are its expression. You are its extension. You are its breath on earth. So it's not about getting more of the divine. It's about us seeing opportunities where we can be more of a vessel for this light and for this love and for this wholeness and for this peace and for this joy. It's looking for those opportunities and saying, am I a vessel? Am I open? Am I willing? And if I find that there's something in the way of me being willing, then that becomes my next order of business. That's the work that I have to do in the world. So that's my introduction. Different from the first, yes? I do this for the choir. They get tired of listening to me twice. So there you go. But we are talking about our core values, not our core issues. That's another Sunday. Talking about our core values. And core values are those things which are, when this community sat down to do this discernment process around core values, it's like, what are those principles, those values that would be essential to us, that we would not waver from no matter what happened? In other words, these are ideals. These are ideals. And we talked about love and abundance. This week we're talking about inclusivity. And what we're saying with these values is that, I think I said this last week. I don't remember much what I say week by week, but there's something, it's kind of like those guardrails that keep you from going off the mountain. You're grateful that you have them. So the values let you know if you are deviating from who you've come here to be. And so inclusivity is what we're talking about today. And inclusivity is not a moral imperative, okay? Inclusivity, people say, oh, you should be inclusive. You should invite Johnny to your party. That would be really nice. That's that sort of ethical notion of, being kind, and we should include Bobby and Sally and all that. I'm not talking about that. It doesn't emerge from some sort of a value judgment in the mind. It emerges instead from a fundamental truth about us. That inclusivity is not something that we are creating. Inclusivity is something that we're seeking to express because it's already so. Does that make sense? You and I are already connected. We may think that we look separate and we live in different houses and have different families and all this, but the spiritual truth of our being is that we are already woven together in one giant tapestry called life, humanity, whatever you want to call it. And in that inseparable humanity, we are one. So inclusivity is a value that we hold here as a community because we want to be expressing the truth of our being. We want to put in form that which is already true in truth. And so inclusivity is for us to say, what would that mean for this community to be inclusive? What does that mean about how we welcome people? We welcome and honor everyone, is what it says. But what does that mean for us? And this issue, or this value, has been one of the things that bring a lot of people to a unity community. Because people oftentimes feel, from the very first time they cross the threshold of a unity community, they feel an openness. They feel a welcomeness. In fact, many people feel, because it doesn't have a lot of doctrine, or really doesn't have really any doctrine or dogma to sort of restrict your sense of being yourself, that many people feel at home when they walk into a unity community. There's a sense of coming home to your heart. coming home to feeling that the environment supports you at the level of your authentic self. Einstein talked about what gets in the way of us experiencing this oneness, and he said this. He said, a human being is part of the whole called by us universe, una meaning one, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to the affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Albert Einstein. Did you know? Yeah. Mother Teresa said it this way. She said, if we have no peace in the world, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to each other. Our normal surface mind, our ego nature, is very good at noticing distinctions. In fact, it's part of the mind's function to be able to recognize distinctions. We need that in the world. It's not that that part of us is evil or should be taken away. It's that when it's used heartlessly to exclude people from our hearts, then it's problematic. It's hurtful. It does damage. And the recognition that we are one, at the same time we respect the boundaries that are necessary to live in the world with separate bodies and separate families and separate homes, is using our principles in a way that makes sense in the world. So this idea of inclusiveness in a spiritual community, we can raise the bar really high, and we can say, we welcome everyone here. Now, we may not say that in our house, right? But we can say that in a spiritual community. And that's a wonderful thing, and that's, I think, what drew a lot of us to a place like this, not just because we could be accepted for who we are, but also that the faith, the philosophy of unity has more of a universal feel to it. It honors the diversity of the many paths to God, all of them which teach love. Jesus, of course, was probably the most radically inclusive spiritual teacher of all. And somehow this got overlooked by the faiths that rose up in his name. I don't know if you noticed this, but Jesus was radically inclusive. He would consort with people who society would essentially look down upon. And certainly the religious authorities of the time would say, these people were unclean, these people were not worthy, they should not be consorted with, they should not be hung out with, you shouldn't invite them, you shouldn't talk to them. Jesus would have none of it. He was radically inclusive. People who were drank and too much, professions that were considered shameful by religious authorities anyway, tax collecting, prostitution. He spoke with the Samaritan woman at the well, and talking to an unattended woman, that was a bad, and talking to a Samaritan, another bad. And he showed exceptional compassion and empathy regardless of the sufferer's general background, their previous religious behavior, or their social standing. Harlots, Roman soldiers, the wealthy, the desperately poor were all the same to Jesus, who refused to discriminate in such matters. This did not come from Jesus following some commandment. I want you to hear this. Those commandments that we all heard about, the 10 commandments, are ways of getting people to be nice to each other. So when, not killing someone, it's a really nice thing to do. Don't steal, don't have adultery with the other person's wife, blah, blah, blah. These are nice things to do. These are the moral imperatives that are imposed upon the unenlightened. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not putting down the people from before. We resemble this in many ways too. But the purpose of those commandments is not to have this dictum from this external God figure telling you what to do and not to do. The purpose of commandments are for you to live in a civilized way until you realize where those commandments would come up naturally as you understand your connection with all beings. And then the need for the external commandments dissolve out of a recognition of our oneness in which compassion would flow like water. And empathy would just emerge like a spring of natural expression of being with another person. It wouldn't have to be able to see, how should I be with this person right now? See, the commandment tells me, do this. That's checking outside of ourself because we don't have an internal sense of oneness or connection, from which emerges compassion and love. And Jesus was a teacher of love. He wasn't a teacher of commandments. He said, if you could see the way I see, this is the only way to be. Oh, write that one down on the back of your bulletin. If you can see the way I see, there's only one way to be. This is emerging from the enlightened state of mind. He saw it. He saw people. We do all this namaste, which is wonderful. I do it. Namaste. I behold the Christ in you. I behold the divine in you. I see you as a divine being. Jesus didn't just go through the motions. You understand what I'm saying? He actually saw. He looked beyond the appearances. And he would see the divine self. He would see the child of God that was maybe masquerading as a prostitute or a whatever. He could see to the essential being, the loving being. He could see how God, the light beyond the lampshade of appearance. And it's like, at Halloween, you have these cute little kids that come to the door, and they're dressed up in scary costumes. I mean, how long does it take before you open the door and you see a 5-year-old girl dressed up as a scary witch, know that she's not a scary witch? How long does that take? Immediately, you know. I mean, you don't go like, oh my God, and shut the door and then have your spouse tell you, oh no, she's just wearing a mask. Look, here, let's lift the mask up here. See, she's a cute little girl. She's just wearing this mask. She's pretending to be this person, and you were judging her on who she was pretending to be. If she really wanted to be herself, she would just really drop all of that, and then you would see her. Well, that's what spiritual mastery does, is it strips away the externals, the appearances of what we show the world, and it shows the light, the truth of our being. And that's what spiritual masters do for us. They invite us into opening our spiritual eyes to see what the physical eyes do not tell us. The body's eyes are very good at constructing stories around appearances, but the spiritual eyes don't have any stories. There's no stories. It's just this notion of oneness and connection and love. And so our spiritual evolution is really about us noticing that whenever we can see somebody beyond the appearance, we are making progress. We are making progress. And I want to talk this morning. Is it still morning? No, it's not morning anymore. I want to talk this afternoon about an event that happened last Sunday here in Santa Barbara that I was so privileged to be a part of. Just an amazing, inspiring event. And it was the Interfaith Pride Festival here in Santa Barbara, and it was at the Sunken Gardens at the courthouse. And I had a small part to play in reading part of the program. And this was the very first interfaith event in Santa Barbara honoring spiritual communities that said, we open our doors to all people in this community, including people who identify themselves as LBGT. This was a historic occasion for this community. First ever. And there's something like 250 faith communities in Santa Barbara, and 20 of those faith communities attended this event and stood up and said, we stand for inclusivity, we stand for welcoming people. And it was a great moment for all the spiritual communities, and I was so glad to be there, and particularly inspired by a message that was given by Reverend Frank Schaefer. And Frank Schaefer is a minister now, currently, just recently, was assigned to the Isla Vista United Methodist Church, and he gave like a keynote talk, and hopefully I still have it. Yes, I do. Here's a story about Reverend Frank Schaefer. He and his wife have 3 gay children. And he's a United Methodist minister. That's like oil and water. You understand what I'm saying? According to the doctrine. So, in fact, somebody said, "You have 3 gay children. Now, how do you feel about that? That God gave you 3 gay children?" He said, "I think it happened so that I would really get the message." And he did. So I'm going to read a transcript, a portion of what he shared with us. It was so moving. It says, "I'm the father of 3 gay children. And why? Because God wanted me to get the message. And I did get the message when my oldest son, Tim, came out to me in the year 2000 when he was just barely 17 years old. And that I learned what it meant to be a gay person from him. And the struggles that come with it and the fears that he lived under. He was at the point of taking his own life. Because he thought it would be better for his dad, the minister, and in the church and beyond, if he was no longer here. It all started when he heard his own church, the United Methodist, saying to him at a conference, 'There is no place for gay people in this church.' And the whole question of salvation was brought up. And he was made to believe that he, as a homosexual person, would not go to heaven. And it began an immense struggle for him. He shared with us that he cried himself to sleep most every night, praying to God, 'Please take this away from me. I don't want to be homosexual. I don't want to go to hell.' And when that prayer did not work for many years, he decided it was time to go, to take his own life. Fortunately, his plan did not succeed. And when he came out to us, we had no idea, my wife and I. We just had to embrace him. This was our son. And he'd gone through this agony and this struggle. And he lived in fear. We had no idea. We hugged him, and there were tears running down our own cheeks, and we said to him, "Son, we love you so much. Nothing is ever going to change that." And then we sat down with him, and over the coming weeks and months, we said, "Obviously, you did not choose this for yourself. You tried to pray your gayness away, and it didn't work. So maybe this means that God created you this way. You are created in the image of God." And it took my son many years to be able to accept himself, to be who God has created him to be, a gay man. Reverend Schaefer went on to describe how when his son was 23 years old, he came to his dad, and he said, "I found the man I want to marry. I love him. And I want you to perform this ceremony." And Frank Schaefer, knew the doctrine of his church, but he also knew without even pausing that he had to perform that ceremony for his son because of all that his son had gone through, that he knew that he would perform that ceremony. Hell, if he had hell to pay, so be it. And he did. They went 300 miles away to a state, Massachusetts. This is from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts, where same-sex marriage was legal at the time. This was several years ago. He performed the marriage, and shortly thereafter, he did have hell to pay when his denomination came down on him and brought charges against him and defrocked him and made him stand trial. And he described how with the amount of fear that he had as he walked into this church court, and he knew they were going to ask him, "Will you ever do this again?" And his lawyers had, what do lawyers do? They prep you, for your testimony. And they had given him this statement, all, written out. And they had said, "Be apologetic." And he said, "You want me to apologize for doing what I know is right in my heart?" He said, "Well, could you have an apologetic tone, Tone it down a little bit if you want to keep your job. And he had 2 children still at home and a spouse. He needed the job. So he was praying to know what to say. And he knew in his heart he could not read this prepared statement, that it was so disingenuous, that it was so inauthentic. It was such a legal maneuver to manipulate the outcome in his favor. But he didn't have the words. He said, I didn't have a piece of paper. I had nothing. And so I went into that chair and I prayed. And I looked out, and there were my supporters, people who had come to support me. And they were all wearing their rainbow stoles, and their allies were there. And I could feel their prayers. I could feel them knowing the truth for me. And I was lifted up by that. And so when it was my time to speak, I said this. I said, before you ask me, I will tell you. And he pulled out a rainbow stole out of his pocket and put it around him. He said, I will honor the love of 2 people, and I will perform same-sex marriages. I have nothing more to say. And that was, come hell or high water, he was willing to stand in his truth. Because there was something more important at stake there than his job, than the approval of his peers. There was something more fundamentally true that came out of this sense of knowing that we are here to honor the dignity of every person, to honor love, period, is what the name of this Pride Festival was, love, period. He could see that in his son. He could see what his son had gone through, that this was not anything to be disregarded. This was not something that anyone could legislate or reject or disregard or diminish or make less. And he did lose his job for 6 months. And I don't know the circumstances, but I read, as I did a follow-up, that he was reordained or refrocked, I guess they could call it, because he was defrocked, so he was refrocked. And recently is in Isla Vista at the United Methodist Church. And I commend you. If you can't be here on Sunday and you're in Isla Vista, go. This man is an extraordinary, passionate, beautiful man. He's got an Irish brogue. It's just beautiful, beautiful. And you can watch everything I just told you on YouTube. I wouldn't have told you that at the beginning of the service, of course. But if you just search under Love, period, or Pride Festival, Santa Barbara, this whole event and his speech is on there. It takes a deeper understanding than just some legislature or the Supreme Court saying, okay, now it's okay. It takes you and I really digging deep in our hearts and knowing that this is essentially right. Not that it's right because someone says it's right or that it should be this or it should be that. This is the problem with most of what the world suffers under. It doesn't have any internal authority. You know, we're starved for internal authority because we don't dig deep. I do this at times too. I find my judgments flaring. Do you? I close my heart to people. I see something or somebody in a certain way, and I have a story about them. So there's work to be done. But gosh, when we do the work, like what Frank did, when he said, "It's my heart. It's in the truth of my being where I will find my way to show up in the world, come what may," that the world begins to reflect the light of truth instead of the doctrine of fear and separation. This is This is all that we have to do. We have to go within. This is why we pray. This is why we meditate. This is why we read the teachings of the Master. That's why we listen to Mother Teresa when she says, the only problem is we forgot that we belong to each other, and we meditate on that and contemplate on it. How is it that I belong to you and you and you and you and you? What is the essential connection that we all have? Exploring that, contemplating that, seeing how that's true. That then can be the guide for the way we show up. That then can become that which has us opening our hearts to one another. Not from some mandate of should or some guilt or some shame or some external authority of any kind, but because when I see that you and I are one, I can't do anything else but treat you like I would treat myself. That's why Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. The old golden rule. And the golden rule, again, the rule idea, I don't like the idea that it's even called a rule, because rule, I think, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Am I doing this right? That rule is external. But when you're in your heart, that's what rules. Love rules. And that's what I'm working on every day. I'm working on authenticity. I don't want to be following all our core values because, well, that's what I should be doing as minister of Unity of Santa Barbara. I don't want to be a follower. I want to be a leader for my own truth. Does this make sense? That you can be led by what you know to be the truth, by what you feel in your heart. That's when your life changes. That's when the world changes. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall free you. And we are all freed. And one more thing I want to share today, and I have her permission to do this, is Ellen Osler, member of our church, transgender individual. 15 years ago, she came to Santa Barbara, and she began calling up all the spiritual communities saying, I'm a transgender individual. I wonder if I would be welcome in your spiritual community. And repeatedly, the answer she got was, well, usually she said it was something like this, could you hold on for a second? And then there'd be a big pause, and then, really, not so much, not really, sorry. And then she'd call another one, and another one, another one, another one, and basically got the same answer. No. We're a faith community. We're a spiritual community. In fact, we follow the teachings of Jesus and all that. But no, that wouldn't work here. And so she called Unity, and she got, of course, please come. And she said, standing at this event last Sunday was such a powerful event for her. Seeing all these 20 clergy standing up there from many of the faith communities that she undoubtedly had contacted and asked if she could come and be in their sanctuary. They had a change of heart, not a change of mind. You understand? You can always, you can change your mind, but if it doesn't come from the heart, then it's flimsy. It's like a flap in the wind. It can go any way. The wind blows. But when you have a change of heart, there's just no choice. And what Ellen said to me this morning is she said, I go around giving talks to people, groups, and she talks to therapists and schools. And she says, my message is this. It's not so much about being a transgender person or a gay person and coming out. She says, it's about having the courage just to be yourself. Just be who you are. We live in a world in which there's a lot of risks in being ourselves. Have you noticed? That if you just want to be yourself, there's risks involved there. But then you get to a point where you realize the risk of not being myself, whatever that might bring in terms of how the world might judge me, pales in comparison to the cost that it's taking for me to deny myself. That bud trying to stay all closed up, that rosebud trying to stay all closed up, is more painful than to risk opening to the elements. So this is a message for all of us here, that we all have room to grow. There's more authenticity for us to share with the world. There's more permission today maybe than there was yesterday for us to be ourselves. And we can be the givers of that. We can be the ones that welcome people who are different from us with a little bit more understanding, a little bit more compassion. Because there's not a person in this room that I would say has not gone through an experience where sometime in your life you were just being yourself. You were being your authentic, genuine self, and somebody judged you. They couldn't see you for who you really were. They made up a story about you. They called you something, or they said something, or they shunned you, or they rejected you, or they criticized you, and you were crazy because you said, "You just don't see me." Have you ever said that to anyone? You just don't get me. So every one of us has felt that. And there's room for us to grow, to be more willing to be the people we have come here to be, and to be more willing to accept people to be who they've come here to be. I got my work to do. I know I do. And we can do this as a community. I'm grateful that we have a community that people might have to finally find a safe refuge here just to be loved and accepted for who they are. I'm grateful that we have that as a value here, and we have room to grow, and even more so. Yes? Yes. Thank you. Good.